afternoon, folks. A bit of a tense moment there as our sound disappeared. Welcome to the first Seedco Wheat webinar. It's usual for us to run field days throughout the country at the end of every season, but due to this totally ridiculous year that we've had, every field day has been cancelled. We were preparing for a field day in August, and yeah, it just looked like it wasn't going to happen. So we decided we would convert to a webinar. So yes, we are hoping that Zoom stays with us. We're hoping that technology works in our favor. Just as we go in, just a few housekeeping rules. As you joined this afternoon, your microphone was automatically muted. Please do us a favor, keep your microphones on mute. If they are unmuted, we will get terrible feedback, and we don't want the whole system to crash. If you look at the bottom of your screens, you'll see a little icon which says Q&A. If you have any questions, we will run a question and answer session at the end. Please just type in your questions. We'll flash them onto the screen at the end, and we'll go through all of the questions. So this afternoon, I'm with Adrian Chibanga. I don't think I need to introduce him. I think everybody that deals with Seedco has known Adrian for a number of years. Adrian is chief agronomist. He has the enviable task of keeping all of the trials in the country going, including all of those thousands of roadside trials. I am Audrey du Toit. Most of you know me, commercial sales manager. So yes, this afternoon, Adrian and I will present to you the wheat trials. So today we get to look at two trials. We had 5 this year. Today we're going to look at Lusaka West, and we're going to look at Makushi. Then next year, if we're feeling brave, we're going to look at Mazabuka, which is a first for us. We haven't done Mazabuka before. And we're going to look at Chisamba. Chisamba is very interesting. Irrigation is the main topic there. That's just a sneak preview to whet your appetite for next year. Anyway, let's move on now. We're going to move into the Lusaka West trials. Just before we go there, though, I would like to say that although you can just see Adrian and myself, there's a whole host of people sitting out there that are helping us with technology today, and we're very grateful to them. Thanks. Let's go to Lusaka West.
Sure.
Good day, folks. Today we are filming at our Lusaka West farm. This is where we have our trial plots. Being winter, obviously, we've been trialing wheat seed. We do trials here every year, maize, soya, wheat. We test different things of interest every year. We test planting dates, we test plant populations, biologicals, different things that we think will interest a farmer and will help us to all improve our growing. So today I have with me my associates from Seedco. We're very privileged to have Farmer Fred join us. We managed to convince him to come down from Makushi and give us some advice from the farming point of view. So yeah, we're grateful to have you here, Fred. I think everybody knows Adrian Chibanga, our chief agronomist from Seedco, a well-known face. And then recently we've been joined by Sangita. I think I have to duck down so that you can see Sangita. Sangita has joined us from many years at Amaran, and we are appreciating her expertise in the chemical industry. I'm standing in the planting day trials right now, the plots for planting day trials. Historically, we have always tested the 1st of May, the 15th of May, the 1st of June, and the 15th of June. And over the years, we've ascertained without doubt that planting on the 1st of May will yield the highest across all of the varieties. What's always been very interesting, though, is that you start to see a difference between the varieties for a planting date of 15 May. It's even more pronounced on the 1st of June, and obviously on the 15th of June, some of the varieties give appalling yields. So what we've done this year, we've changed our timing a bit. We've got the 20th of April, we have the 5th of May, then we've got the 20th of May and the 5th of June. So we've managed to bring it forward. I'm really pleased that we've been able to do this. If you speak to farmers, Chisamba, Kabwe area, they will tell you without doubt, very emphatically, that they get the best yields on planting dates between the 20th and the 30th of April. So that plot over there was planted on the 20th of April. This one was planted 2 weeks later. It's planted on the 5th of May. So now it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. I'm in Select here. What we have seen historically is that for plantings on the 1st of May, Select will always out-yield Shungu. But yet by the time you get to the 15th of May, the yields are very similar. And yet when you get to the 1st of June, the yield of Shungu has actually last year has outperformed Select. So bringing it forward this year, it's going to be very interesting to see now whether we are going to get a difference in yield between the 20th of April and the early May planting. These are really where our eyes are focused. In Makushi, historically, people have always said to me 1st to 15 May, best planting time. Now, unfortunately, we only do these small plot trials in Lusaka, so we are a slightly different climate. But it's going to be very interesting, based also on what Chisamba and Kabwe does, to see now whether the 20th of April actually outperforms the early May planting. We will keep you updated once the seed is in the bag. Interesting, Adrian. Planting dates.
Sure.
In my opinion, one of the most important issues in managing wheat and attaining yields.
Yes.
Yeah. Anything that you want to add to it? You know, we had a very warm May this year. It was a very warm start to the season, and surprisingly, we had a cooler August.
Yes.
The last 2 years, August has been incredibly hot.
Yes.
So yeah, I don't know what your take is on the climate that we're seeing at the moment.
Yeah, Audrey, I think we must be prepared to see a lot of these shifts in the way that the seasons present themselves because of climate change. But what's very, very important about every crop is timing of any practice that we apply onto a crop. It's a very key management tool, and judging from the few years, the last 3 to 5 years that we've observed, we've seen that our planting window, which was originally 15th April to the 15th of May, has actually shifted, and it has moved into May itself. And you find the best yields the last 3 years have been from crops that are planted from the 1st to about the 10th of May. And so what we urge the farmers therefore is to look out for that window and choose the best lands, the most potent lands, and those are the ones they fix into there in case their planting period exceeds the 10 days that we're talking about. That way we leverage high yields, which we so dearly need. And then talking about the warm August, we've really had warm ones previously, and the last 3 years that has contributed to shriveled grain, compromised grain fill, and lower yields, of course, also compounded by the influx of newer diseases that we've had. But then this cooler August that we've had is certainly something interesting, and we should be looking to some much better yields. Just 2 days ago, I was with one of our clients that bought from us farms in Guerrero area, and he told me it wasn't his best land. He's already gone over 9 on Shungu. So it's going to be interesting to see what yields come out of this as a result of fixing your debts in that high potential period.
Yeah, certainly. It really is. We're going to move on now. We are going to look at biologicals. Fred will be chatting to us about some of his experiences with biologicals in the past few years. Let's go back to Lusaka West.
Yeah, I think we are looking at a trial here which is very interesting. Biologicals. When you talk of biologicals, you remind me of what I went through personally as a farmer regarding weed diseases such as Septoria and BLS. I'm happy to hear that your levels of disease in this biologically treated without a fungicide is much lower compared to where you applied your fungicides. Yeah. I think this is taking us back to the basics, you know, the basics of nature, which I think as farmers we have destroyed many times by our excitement of using the chemical treatments. You know, nature provides a space also for itself to work, you know, in our farming. What am I talking about? A few years ago, when we were badly hit by BLS, we came in the following year with a heavy fungicide treatment, starting as early as 20 days, you know, and about 4 fungicides with an interval of about 2 weeks. But that year we suffered the worst yield reduction, and the BLS was very high, you know. The following year we said, well, let's try it a different way. And what did we do? We reduced on our fungicides and or the bactericides, and then instead came in very early with the biologicals plus foliars, those that would stimulate some immunity in the crop and give it that oomph, if you want, or probably for lack of a better word, give it that early start for it to fight off some of these diseases. And then we only got away with about 2 fungicide sprays. And in fact, even the second fungicide spray was very debatable whether we should have done it or not. And that year we had our best yields. Yeah. So I think we have to get back to the drawing board a little bit and see how we can work together with nature. And biologicals in this way play a very, very big role in stimulating immunity into the crop. Remember, there is a microclimate there, and the rhizosphere is full of fungi, beneficial fungi or beneficial bacteria, if you want to call them like that. And those have a role to play in making sure that the plant itself grows healthy, you know. But I think also these outbreaks that we are seeing now, it's really because of us. Our practices have encouraged the breakout of BLS and even Septoria or whatever. You know, we have relied too much on chemical control. I'm not ruling out the role of chemical control here. It has a role there, but I think we have to use it more judiciously, more carefully, you know, for us to get the best out of it. It's just like the concept of IPM, integrated pest management. It goes back to disease. While we apply it more on the insect side, you know, where we want to use all sorts of methods, cultural methods, the beneficials. Remember that even in the fungal, in the micro spheres, there is the beneficial ones. And as we go in flat out spraying these fungicides, we're killing a lot of those. So I think we have to get back to the drawing board and see, let's re-strategize. And I'm sure every farmer knows what works best for them. The act of copying, because your neighbor has done this, then you also want to do it, sometimes can be helpful, but not always. So know your situation and study it well, develop it over a period of time, and then try and stick to that. If it has worked for you, try and stick to that. Yes. But I think we lose a lot of yield because of over-reliance on chemical fertilizers. Yes. Rather, chemical control of disease and insects. Yeah.
I like the key points that you have brought out here, which also was the keys that informed us in coming this direction in our trials program this season. Because with the outbreak of the newer diseases, the Septoria and the BLS, we found that the CP that we've been depending on did not really have solutions, and if there was any solutions, they are new and they are only registered in Europe, and that they were only going to be available into the African market the next 3 to 5 years, especially powdery mildew this year, which has been more pronounced than any other fungal disease. On our CP programs, there's been more powdery mildew, and very little, in fact, came in quite late with our prophylactic of 500 mils of a BA. One strip is a BA straight, the other strip is a BA mixed with some micronutrients, so lower populations of BA. But we saw very good control with a 500 mils, which is a preventative spray, until there was occurrence of disease on the lower leaves, and then we came in with about 2 kgs of the products that we have used here. Of course, the farmers that are interested can get in touch with us, because we partnered on here with a local company that's got the products, and we can link you up. But we have seen good results so far in terms of what we have observed, and then we're waiting to see what goes in the bag. But it's also interesting to learn from you that, from your experience, what went into the bag was higher than historically a focus on chemicals only.
Yeah. I think the next question farmers would ask is, when do you apply your biologicals? To me, I think as early as possible, because the biologicals are living organisms.
Yes.
And they'll live there in the crop canopy. Yes. And so the earlier you apply them, the better.
Yes.
Yes. Personally, I like putting them maybe at about day 14.
Yes.
After planting. I put them in and they go along, and if you can afford to put another one,
yes,
bring it in. They are usually not very expensive, so put it in before you bring in your fungicides, and don't put your fungicides too close to your biologicals. But I've also found that the foliar fertilizers, also there are some of those which are mild. The mild foliar fertilizers also are very helpful when you spray them a bit early in the season rather than too late.
Yeah.
They a bit synergistic with the micros, with the biologicals rather. They're a bit synergistic, so they work better. They help the crop, take off very well with the strength and fight the disease.
Sure. Yeah. Earlier on in our conversation, you also highlighted key important factors as to why we come in. We must come in with biologicals earlier than chemical options. And I liked when you chatted about the fact that the earlier, the better, because it gives room for the biological populations to multiply. Mm-hmm. One, because you need them in good numbers, mm-hmm, for them to fight. And then secondly, also that in case you went in with a chemical product, the residual effect gets to have an impact on your biologicals that you are applying, such that it weakens them and slows the rate at which they multiply, because that you've started with a chemical and then put a biological products later. Yeah. So we are very grateful for your thoughts. We do definitely. Sidco is 8 years, and a man of a white beard like you is lots of experience that we can leverage. Thank you so much for featuring.
It's been a wonderful pleasure to be part of this.
Sure.
Seedco is 80 years.
80 years.
80 years. Isn't that wonderful?
It's
I'm
probably
feeling
got
quite at home.
It's probably got the white beard. Lots of wisdom.
Hopefully I don't have a white beard.
No, you don't.
Yeah, so as Adrian knows, for the last year we did a lot of work with biologicals across the country.
Yes.
And in 4 sites, I think it was, we sprayed only biologicals on one portion of the land and only chemicals in the other portion of the land. And I'm not talking about small plots, I'm talking about under pivots. We had variable results. Chisamba was brilliant. It knocked the rust, it knocked the powdery mildew. Mpongwe and Makushi was a bit disappointing.
Sure.
Chisamba we put on an extra spray, Makushi and Mpongwe we didn't. I really like Fred's take of putting biologicals on the seed and then applying again before we actually start applying the proper chemicals.
Yes, yes.
To me, that makes a lot of sense.
Yes, it does. And critically also because these things are not in their numbers, because biologicals is a numbers game. There is so many colonies of populations of causal pathogens, and you only need so much of beneficials to parasitize on the causal pathogens for any incidences of disease to actually be written off. And so when we apply them, they are not in their full numbers, but as they begin to integrate and live on the plant, then they begin to multiply. And so if you go in early, there is an opportunity that with diseases usually start popping a little later. So by the time they want to come in, you want to have your numbers with biologicals right.
High population.
Yeah, and those numbers can be attained, first of all, by what he said, which was very critical, a reintegration. I liked it when he said, let's go back to the basics that we messed up. And so, but our journey is going to be a reintegration, and so care must be applied on when exactly, timing. Because if you go in with the hard conventional crop protection chemicals, and then you come and top onto the crop a biological, you may be killing it also. You may be reducing the numbers. But if you go in early, so it's a timing thing because it's a numbers game.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, very interesting. Fred said adamantly there that in the first year they used 4 fungicide sprays, and the next year they put on biologicals and only 2 fungicide sprays afterwards. And the second one, it was debatable whether they really needed it. So yes, we will definitely be pursuing the biological game.
Sure.
We're going to move on now. We're going into micronutrients at the Lusaka West trial ground.
Yes.
This is a field here of shungu. It was planted around the 20th of May, so later than most people plant. But what we wanted to do here was just to look at vigor, and we've applied different products to the seed. So if you look down here, these are taken from the plot on my right and the plot on my left. One was seed treated with a product called ActiSeed, which is a micronutrient mix. This plot, the plot on the left was not treated with anything, it was just planted straight. Just out of interest, we've known for a number of years that a micronutrient mix on the seed does have an impact on the plant growth. We've literally just taken a handful from this plot and a handful from that plot. You can see, if you look carefully, the difference in the vigor. Thicker stems here, still some green, these already drying off, and the leaves definitely drier than these leaves. Interestingly also, if you look at the heads, I'll bring them close together, you can see the color, the difference in color in the heads. I'm not going to make a comment on the yield because I don't think it's fair to just look at 2 plants and comment on the yield. But certainly there does seem to be much more plumpness in these pips here as opposed to these kernels here. So it's going to be interesting to see what comes from this at the end of the day. But it's just a reminder to farmers to please consider using a micronutrient dressing on your seed when you plant. We here, just for your interest, are sitting, we are a beautiful brown soil. We've got a high clay content. Don't be tempted to think that if you are one of the few farmers in Zambia that has a good clay content, that you have enough micronutrients in your soil. You will still get a yield response by using a micronutrient dressing.
I would also want to urge farmers to do some trials on their own. Like I said earlier, to see what really works. Your first planted field, your first planted crop will always be an indicator of what you expect in the season.
Sure.
So there is no need of going flat out with a blanket treatment. Just because you budgeted for it or you planned for it, then you have to spend it. Observe the behavior of the crop, and that will tell you what you should do to the crop. So I think that is very, very key. And if we all did that, I think we'll have, one, a safer environment, less use of chemicals, but more production. You know, and you know the cost of production will be less, which is, I think, all of us are looking out to reduce the cost of production, reduce the price of food.
Sure.
You know.
Micronutrients, Adrian. Yeah, very interesting. You can definitely see a difference in those plants.
Yes.
Yeah, just run us through. You know, we all know that micronutrients are important.
Yes.
And we know that in Zambia we're short of copper. We're short. Well, okay. There's parts that are not short of copper.
Yeah, sure.
But generally, we're short of copper. We're short of zinc. We're short of boron. We're short of molybdenum. Just run us through specifically molybdenum and boron.
Yeah, sure. Because we were focusing these particular ones and basically for their role. You know, when Crop Science is teaching us about crop nutrition, they actually list them as the 16 essential elements. So it's not only nitrogen. Just because it's the one that's needed in bulk doesn't mean that the 200 grams of molybdenum is not important. And so our focus basically on molybdenum boron is because of seed vigor. So applied on the root and how through the plant. Basically, because your biggest budget on your cereals is your nitrogen.
Yeah.
But then the role of molybdenum in synergizing the use efficiency of nitrogen by the plant is what is the inspiration behind this. You can see in wheat it is very much required for stem elongation. And you need that because that's where yields are being determined around that time. So stem elongation, molybdenum plays a huge role because of its role around the enzymes that promote the use of nitrogen. And then we moved on to boron, and it cannot be overemphasized. Boron on the seed or in your beso, very important and so much emphasized because there is a very thin line between sufficient and toxicity in terms of boron. So you don't want to save it for later when you can cause another terrible situation to your crop. So, but boron, once you have it in there, it's the one that's responsible for proper pollination, pollen formation, flowering, and then the best grain field maize or wheat crop, it's been as a result of sufficient boron supplied to your crop. And so critically these two micronutrients we zeroed in, and you could see from the pictures there, you could see from the trials how this one was more vigorous and had a bigger size head.
Yeah,
and we're
definitely
hoping-
plumper.
Exactly,
Definitely plumper.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same planting date.
Sure.
And yeah, very interesting that.
Sure.
Okay, well, we'll see what
What
comes
goes
out
in
of
the
the
bag.
bag. Yeah, it's going to be very interesting.
Sure.
Moving on from Lusaka West, we're now going to head towards Makushi. We're going to introduce you to Pete Harrell. A lot of you already know Pete Harrell. Pete has 3 varieties under one pivot. He has Shungu, he has Select, and he has a competitor variety. So yes, it's planted slightly later, middle of May, I think he said. But yes, let's go and join Pete in Makushi.
Sure.
Morning, folks. We are now in Makushi with Pete Harrell. I'm sure a lot of you know Pete. We are on the northeast side of Makushi, towards very close to Chingelo. I'm here with Adrian again. Today we are looking at different varieties of wheat and really different stages of wheat. So I here am standing in Shungu. Pete and Adrian are standing in Select. You can see the line down the center there, and we're going to chat to Pete a little bit. It's the first time he's grown Select, so we're going to chat to him on the differences he's seen between the varieties and any other interesting stuff that he would like to highlight. Over to you, Adrian.
Thanks a lot, Audrey. Welcome again, Pete.
Thank you.
Thanks for the pleasure of having us on your farm.
It's a pleasure.
Sure. So I think under 10 minutes, we just want to find out your observations now that you have a Shungu, an SC Select, and another variety that is not seed course, but we will appreciate your observation of the 3 varieties. Specifically, I would like to quickly just dive into the Select, being newer, and I'm sure it's the first time you're growing it. One of the major concerns has been crop establishment and the fact that it's lighter seed. We just wanted to hear your thoughts around your planting practices. In our chat earlier, you highlighted a few things that I think are key for farmers to learn from your wisdom. So planting practices and the impact of that less weight per 1,000 pip count in comparison to the Shungu.
Okay, so we planted this all on the same day with the same planter. It was the 15th of May. I was very concerned with the size of the Select seed, not wanting too thick a plant population.
Yes.
So the Shungu went on at about 80 kgs a hectare, and I reduced the rate on Select slightly, and we averaged 75 kgs. The field was had a light, very light disking after fertilizing. Otherwise, we direct drilled straight into the soil.
Yes.
At about not more than 25 millimeters, but 25 to 0 millimeters depth. Watering practices, first watering of about 15 mils, and then 2 days later come around with light waterings until emergence. There was no major difference in emergence between the different varieties. I did notice that the Shungu was more vigorous once it was upped, and the Select was a bit slower. But as we've progressed, it's catching up. I'm very happy, especially with the problem of powdery mildew, as you note from the dam, and the prevailing wind. Select's certainly holding its own a lot better than the other varieties. They've had 3 sprays, all with original brands, so there's nothing. I do try and spray all my fungicides by plane to prevent any mechanical damage, and creating a channel for disease to come in. But at the end of the day, it's going to be the combine that's going to to tell us the real story.
Sure.
There has been some mention of concern that at a later date the Select might not fill out. We are lucky to be at a cooler environment here, and hopefully we can see it through, but the combine will be the telling a real story.
That's very true.
It's a question for you. Difference in flowering, going into flowering, Shungu slightly quicker than Select. What was your observation?
Very much so. It was about a week to 10 days earlier. The other seed variety was second, and then this is much later. I was concerned at one stage, but it's coming into its own now, and it seems to have tilled more. I haven't done a head count, so that's just a visual observation. And yeah, I'm happy at the moment.
Sure.
So we noticed that you're on between 105 and 110 days at the moment, and it is looking like the Shungu is starting to show its first signs of dry down. The Select is definitely still filling out.
The whole field's only had about 330 mils of irrigation so far. Everything's done on evaporation pan with the IriShed from Seedco, and I'm pretty sure with the evaporation that we've got now, we'll get this crop through under 450 mils.
That's very interesting, because it's that water management, and
It's critical.
that's very critical to disease management, especially.
Because of the dam right next door and the prevailing wind, this particular pivot has always been a huge problem with powdery mildew. So seeing this Select holding its own and much cleaner, it's given me a lot more confidence for the future.
Sure.
To look at this variety. I do try and rotate barley and wheat on this field, just to break the disease cycle. But we rely very much on your plant breeders to give us some genetics that can cope, because chemicals are so expensive these days.
That's very true. At Seedco, we say it starts with the right seed, and that so much agrees with agronomic principles when we are lining up the production plan. Seed variety selection becomes the number one thing, because you are looking for genetics that will help you reduce the cost of other support inputs, and it's very impressive to come and see that Select has been described by the breeders as a fungal disease resistant variety, and we are actually chuffed to find it expressing itself.
My concern and request as a farmer is not to sit on your laurels. You've got to keep producing more varieties, because we can't just rely on one.
That's true.
We have to we rely on you people to keep producing more varieties that will have this resistance.
Sure. Audrey, any last thoughts?
Adrian, no, I don't think so. I'm going to be very interested to see what goes in the bag here.
That's true.
the observations always are when you walk into Shungu and you look at these short little heads and you suddenly think, oh my goodness. When you start counting pairs, you're often disappointed. As one of our other farmers says, select is easy on the eye. Because you do have a nice long head.
Yeah.
We do know that the grain is lighter, so it's going to be very interesting to see. And I think Pete's right, you know, we've still got some days. It still needs some days, but our evaporation is not hectically high yet.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to work out okay. I think it's going to be a good crop.
Sure. It will be a good place to observe a 15th May planting of SC Select in Kushi, and especially that you have evaporation pan data that we can relate.
Yeah.
My final comment is, at the end of the day, God has the say.
I like your final comment.
You know, moving on to Audrey's comment.
Yes.
If you end up with your top of your ears filling out with 3 to 5 seeds, and the seed filling out, that's where your weight. Counting
That's
the
the
heads,
difference in the weight. Absolutely.
Counting the heads and
counting the pairs.
last year I had the ear length and I had the heads and I didn't have the yield, and my grain was full, but because of frost I didn't have as many seeds.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
So that's
well,
God factor.
Yeah, that is a good factor.
Yes.
For sure. So thank you very, very much for having us, and we are looking forward to learning more from you, and we appreciate you accommodating our strip trials in your lands.
My name is Sheila Zulu, agronomist and trainer here at the Alco Future Farm in Zambia. As you can see behind me, we are currently harvesting Seedco variety SC719, a long maturing variety which we planted in November and we're currently harvesting now. It's a very good variety. We haven't had an easy season. We had so many challenges of lack of moisture, pest infestation, but despite all that, the variety has performed to its full potential. As you can see the cob in my hand, this is like a size of the cob. This is a sample of what we've collected from the field. So as the traits have been stated, you won't get disappointed. So when Seedco says bumper harvest starts with the right seed, this is exactly what we are talking about.
Yeah, so they say the proof of the pudding is in the testing. And here is 719. At Seedco, when we say we are the home of bumper harvest, this is what we talk about. SC719 has taken Zambia and Africa indeed by storm.
I need you to unmute us. Okay. Thanks, guys. I couldn't resist putting in a clip of maize 719. Sheila Zulu from AGCO. They grow Lusaka. They grow in Lusaka or just on the outskirts of Lusaka. They grow 719 every year. Yeah, it's an amazing variety. It's probably the highest selling 7 variety in the country.
Sure.
It is, as far as I know, the highest yielder on silage in the country.
Yes, it is.
It's amazing. You can grow it in Solwezi with 1,500 mils of rain, and you can grow it in Choma, where it's very, very drought tolerant. So, yes, if you are thinking about growing maize this season, give it a thought.
Sure.
That aside, just some concluding remarks on Select. Very interesting, Select. Last year we grew it in just a few locations around the country, and it really seemed to enjoy the north of the country. It did okay in Mpongwe, outperformed some of the other competitive varieties. It did pretty well in not Solwezi, it did pretty well in Serenji, and then it really did very well in Makushi. We had 4, if I'm not mistaken, 4 sites last year where we grew select in Makushi. 1 went over 10, 1 went over 9. The third one, it was a pivot, half select, half shungu. The select outperformed the shungu. The fourth one, I think they were pretty similar, the shungu and the select.
Yeah.
Certainly seems to be a variety that prefers the northern regions and possibly the higher altitudes.
Yes, yes. The high altitudes specifically for the cool environment that the crop can leverage. But also the background to our introducing select is we coming onto the seed crop, onto the wheat crop rather. We brought in select because of its resilience, especially on strains of fungal diseases. And so the right balance is really for the farmers that will get those 10 and 10 plus tons per hectare is to leverage timing of planting and also the high altitude where we can always make sure we have best of potential. You could see in Pittsfield there, we had better potential set actually in terms of your
Lovely long heads.
Lovely long
big
heads.
Yeah.
Lovely long heads. Those heads just need a full window to fill and all other things, management practices kept good. We can be talking another 10 tons out of that.
Yeah, which is interesting because that's why it's showing in Lusaka that it outperforms shungu planted on the 1st of May.
Yes.
Because it has time to fill its grain at the end. Slower into flower, slower into grain fill, but not quite as slow as it goes into flower. So it needs the time to fill the grain.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. Anyway, folks, just before we go into concluding remarks, I would like to remind you that if you do have any questions, to write them down into the question chat at the bottom of your screen, and we will field questions afterwards. Really to wrap up this afternoon. First of all, we talked about planting dates. I think we are stressing at this stage that each particular area has slightly different windows for planting, for the best time of planting. Whichever the window that you are in your specific area, that is the time to target your best lands. That will give you the highest yields. And then the slightly marginal lands to plant on either sides of your good fields. Biologicals, anything else that you wanted to add on planting dates?
Yeah, planting dates is it's a thing that we've observed over 3 years in our trials. It's specifically that your first 10 days of May are your sweetest spot. And just to emphasize, like you said, that if you are planting bigger than you can go in 10 days, then you target your highest potential fields, and then you plant the rest of the fields on either sides of that window of between 1st and 10th of May.
Yeah, I agree with you. Biologicals, very definitely interesting with biologicals that use on the seed, gives the plant an early burst of vigor, used in conjunction with micronutrients.
Yes.
And then preferably again sometime around herbicide. First, it's only generally. Some people will apply second herbicide, but we're talking first herbicide application. We're talking well before applying a growth regulator.
Yes, yeah.
Come in with a second biological. They grow on great through the pivot if you have access to that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they can generally be tank mixed, although obviously you do have to be
a little bit careful. So yeah, I would say that before you want
tax a biological with anything else, just make sure with the agronomist that you have purchased it from, just to make sure you're not going to kill it before it even gets onto the plant.
Exactly. The other thought that I came across recently is a trial that we did in the lab actually, where I need to go back to my notes, where one of them, mycorrhiza and trichoderma, actually suppressed the other. And so there is always a need for an agronomist to advise on the right balance. Usually most of these formulations that have the two of them existing together have properly been packaged. But in a case where you have one product and the other, it's good to always do the application in consultation with an agronomist. The other emphasis really on biologicals, the other takeaway is that the more you build your populations, the less you will be very dependent on chemical use, and that means less cost of production because
there's a huge difference in price between 4 fungicides and 2 fungicides and 2 biologicals.
Sure.
And then we moved on to micronutrients. We were talking about the importance of that early micronutrient dressing on the seed.
Yes.
And generally, from my experience, is that you can mix a biological and a micronutrient on the seed without any problem.
Mm-hmm.
Although, again, I would say consult your agronomist.
Yes.
And then moving on to select, new variety.
Interesting time. Select has got its place, but before I just run into Select, I also we must be worried that we are running into the summer season, and more than wheat desires the boron and molybdenum as you talked about, soybeans desperately need your sodium and molybdenum.
Yes, molybdenum. Yes, very definitely.
Yes. Because
soya is actually a very quick, it's a very high requirement of nitrogen. So,
yes.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, farmers, I think that pretty much wraps it up for this afternoon. Thank you again for joining us. Through the chats, we will be looking at questions and answers. If you are leaving us now, we would like to thank you again. We look forward to seeing you either in a soybean land or a maize land later this year. Let's go into the Q&A.
I'd also urge, Audrey, those that may not have our contacts, that there's going to be a slide that will be shown, so that before they leave, they just wait for that, and we would like to grow together.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. So after the questions and answers, we will show the slide with all of the contacts. Okay. So I promised that I could read that screen from here. Some biologicals require the actual disease which they feed on. This is when they will then multiply and do the work we want them to do. So if you spray them early,
how will they survive without the source of food being necessarily there? So usually what I've found, Audrey, is that a few biologicals formulations get to have a bit of the food that they need to live on.
Yes, in the actual formulation.
Yes.
I've noticed
but most of what they will really live on is your crop residues as they break down. So it's a no burning approach. It's a back to basics where we are not burning our residues, and we are incorporating that because that's what they will come and survive on later as they even build bigger their populations bigger, because the cause of the disease causing pathogens will definitely be outnumbered and they'll all finish, but these still live on as long as you are incorporating crop residues and there is enough organic matter in your soils, so they can live on a lot more than just what they prey on.
Yes, yeah. What's quite interesting, if you take something like a BAA, which is specifically the one that we had in the Lusaka West trial ground, is that That BAA, it's a bacillus, and it actually goes into synergy with the roots.
Yes.
And so there's a large number of biologicals actually that live in synergy with the roots.
Exactly.
And it doesn't matter that the disease is not there. And actually, they assist the plant to be vigorous and to withstand the disease pressure when the disease does arrive in the field.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. I hope that answers your question, Ben.
That's Ben, yeah.
Yeah, Handru. Any plans to revive Nduna? Okay, Handru, there is some Nduna being grown this year. You will be amazed. Probably about, I suppose, 800 hectares or so.
Yes. It's because of it's on demand.
It's
we are on demand.
We're a little wary of Nduna ourselves, to be honest. You can still get really good yields out of Nduna if you get your watering right.
Yeah.
That means that you've got to be a top grower. And yeah, so any plans to revive Nduna? Not really. I think that we're going to put it in the trash can.
I think what Hanro is asking, Hanro is a scientist, and he's very tricky in his questions. If just in case what he's asking is, are we dumping off all the genetics in Nduna? The answer is no, because there is some good things about Nduna, and that's what the breeders are working on to retain as they improve on the weaker side of Nduna. And then we do have a lot of interesting things in the pipeline. Yesterday we had a research review committee, and there was a few things that our head of research showed us that are interesting, and one of which is in registration. We'll see how it comes and performs. So there is definitely strains in the Nduna that we will bounce back. And so not to worry, Handra. I know how this variety has saved this country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Handru, just for your reference, there is actually a trial plot in elsewhere in Makushi where you can pop in and see all of the new breeding stuff. We'll take you there. There's some fascinating stuff there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Moving on, Faisal, recommended irrigation, millimeters for the varieties for Lusaka West clays.
Yeah.
That's a cheeky question. We're only doing irrigation in March. Did you hear us say that?
Yeah, sure. He probably joined a little later. So we have something very interesting coming up in February, March?
February or March, we'll run another webinar.
Because we thought it was very critical. Irrigation scheduling is one of the cultural practices that is impacting on how much disease you invite or how much disease you limit in your wheat. And we already put together information that we thought would be critical to come and show before we start running with the season. But Faisal has got good programs, good irrigation programs. But then again, what Fred was emphasizing on among cultural practices is we've run with blankets so much. We really need to begin to be very much specific, especially that these blanket recommendations were maybe done 10 years ago, and look at how the seasons have changed.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of work in the background that we are putting in to make sure when we land on your farm and we have a conversation, we borrow from your experience and then throw in a few suggestions that can work.
Faisal, what I will say to you though, if you want an exact answer, because I know that you will want an exact answer, is that all of our plots were grown on well less than 500 mils.
Yes.
Well less.
Yes.
Closer to 400, just over 400. That's what we grew on this year. And you know, being almost next door to us, that you didn't have a high rainfall in the summer, similarly to Chisamba. So yes, folks, I think that is it. Thank you for joining us. We will put up our contact details for those that need them.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.